What's up, good people, and welcome back to the second video on the Wrestling's New Kid podcast channel here on YouTube. Last episode, we talked about the big picture of the wrestling industry and where it stands today. This is a three-part trilogy just to get a state of the industry, a history of the industry, a short history, and just to get where I stand as a fan and now as a podcaster, reviewer, and analyst, quote unquote, for the AEW and wrestling products around the world. We talked about AEW nearly sweeping the Sports Illustrated Wrestling Awards and what it says about the industry. But today we're going to zoom in just a tiny little bit because awards don't happen in a vacuum. That's something that I've learned. They happen because of people, because of performances, and because of stellar moments. In this episode, we're going to break down the wrestler of the year. We're going to talk about the matches of the year, feuds of the year, performers who carried AEW in 25 and carried them to nearly sweeping these year-end awards, which they did not sweep in 2024. They were not even near a sweep. It was WWE that nearly swept it last year. So we really want to analyze what AEW did to close the gap. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what WWE did to kind of stall their own momentum. Because these three videos, this trilogy of an introduction to this channel, is all about the industry and what it means to get momentum and what it means to drop the ball once you have that momentum. So first thing we want to talk about for this episode is the Wrestler of the Year and what that means in AEW. And when we talk about Wrestler of the Year, especially through the lens of Sports Illustrated, we're not talking about match ratings and we're not talking about win-loss records. We're talking about the entire wrestler. We're talking about the total package. We're talking about in-ring excellence, character clarity, narrative importance, and whether or not the promotion moves with or without this character. Okay. So in 2025, the Wrestler of the Year for AEW and for Sports Illustrated is Hangman Adam Page. And for anybody that thinks that's a surprise, I really need you to tap in a little bit more. I'm just saying, tap in just a little bit more. This year, Hangman was not only having great matches, but he was positioned as the emotional and the narrative center of AEW. Okay. His whole feud with MJF was about how Hangman is the main character of AEW and how MJF was not only envious of that, but was calling BS on it because how dare y'all, the fans, we the fans, choose Hangman and not him. And he couldn't fathom why. That's why his return this past week, recording this, on December 19th. So this week, MJF returned to make the World's End pay-per-view main event a 4-way instead of just a 3-way. And in that promo, he talked about, you said that I was a coward. You said that I can't crack it up to do what you guys do. So now I'm here to hurt everybody's feelings and to do it in the way that everybody says I can and to do it in a way that's going to force everyone to respect me. Since everybody respects you, Hanger, everybody respects you, Seabiscuit, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in a way that you can't. I'm going to beat the people you can, and I'm going to beat you in the process. But all of that proves my point where every major AEW story this year either felt like it flowed through Hangman or it flowed into the Hangman story that was already happening. His performances all year, it balanced vulnerability, intensity, and purpose. His facial expressions, his body language, his vocal inflections. Oh my God, give this man an award for his public speaking. Not just his promo work, but his everything that was coming out of him through his eyes, through the way he said specific words, through the way he hesitated between answering questions, and all of the things that he did. Everything led to his character work. And in every segment, every match, it was building his character. And as you built his character, it built his connection to the audience. And as that connection was built, and then you connected that to other storylines and other things happening in AEW, what happens is Hangman becomes the rising tide that's lifting all boats. Similar to how previously MJF was a rising tide lifting boats until AEW started doing things a little bit differently, and then even MJF couldn't be saved, and they had to do a hard reset last year to try to save themselves from the hole that they put themselves in. And that's where Hangman comes in. They really started on the downward spiral of Hangman overtly, which led into the redemption of Hangman all throughout 2025, leading up to All In. And now, after All In, they had a second chance to right the wrong of carrying the Hangman momentum better, to the point where it not only benefited Hangman, but the people that was around Hangman. So his first title reign, you had Lance Archer, you had Adam Cole, you had Bryan Danielson, and then CM Punk. All of those people, great wrestlers, good characters, depending on your spectrum and your scale of character work. But nothing was really memorable outside of the matches. And, for those that he had more than one match with, some of those matches really ran together outside of that hour limit draw that he had with Danielson, which was incredible. But this time around, Hangman he's carrying forward the things that he has done this year. So everything he did with having to team up with the Ops and make amends with Swerve, and being short-time frenemies with Will Ospreay to try to get to Jon Moxley at All In. All of those things led into his character growth and his character development and his character progression as far as his accomplishments, his accolades, what he was able to do on screen for the product itself. All of that stuff was connected, and they did not drop the ball with that. They've actually continued to elevate the people around him because of that. Samoa Joe, Swerve, they had already had world title shots before Hangman won a title. But what happened is, because they told a really good, all-encompassing story, company-wide story, you're still able to pull on those things, and you get more world title matches out of it. You get more main event situations out of it. You get more character work out of everybody involved. And now, here's the last couple weeks of the year, and here comes MJF ready to say, hey, I'm back. That's story. That's character work. And he's back mainly to get the world title, of course, but mainly because it took Hangman telling him, you're a coward and you're not doing what you think you're doing. And he went home, and now he's back to prove a point. Hangman spearheaded that. You could make an argument for something else. I would love to hear it. But Hangman is the spear that caused Swerve to say, you know what? I really need to reconcile with my past and the mistakes that I've made. It caused Ospreay to say, you know what? If it's not me, it needs to be somebody. It forced him to get on the same page with Samoa Joe. It caused him to go crazy because he really thought, okay, I'm that guy. And Hangman showed him, no, you're not that guy. So now his whole character has changed. And now Samoa Joe gets an entourage as world champion, something that has never happened, where he had legitimate people surrounding him as the big bad, and he has his lackeys and his henchmen, which most champion heels get. And the fact that he's now getting his, that's an incredible feat. And all of this is happening off of the back of the character work and the performance of Hangman Adam Page. As he goes, the company is going, and they're making sure to try their best to capitalize on that momentum. Not only for him, because he gave the rub to Kyle Fletcher at All Out, which was incredible, their match there. So he's helping other people, but he's also, they're capitalizing on the momentum for himself as well. Like, his character is not dead. His character is not plain Jane. When he lost the title, it wasn't because he was stale or anything like that. It was a natural progression, a storyline beat that makes perfect sense. I thought I was better than you. I'm not. Now I'm angry, so I'm going to do what I have to do to beat you. And that's Samoa Joe. Swerve comes back. I didn't care who was champion. I wanted to be champion, so now this is what we're doing. And here comes MJF saying, I care who's champion. The person that's champion, I got beef with. The person that was formerly champion, I got beef with. And Swerve over there, he don't know this, but we got beef too, because I don't like the way he's been moving. Everything is centered around this world title, which is centered around Hangman Adam Page in 2025, which I absolutely love. So that's Wrestler of the Year, okay? Now let's go bleed into match of the year, where the story either peaks or it begins its real ascent into the next phase of the story. And that's where All In happens. All In Texas, that Texas Death Match 2 between Jon Moxley and Hangman Adam Page. That's match of the year for AEW. Match of the year for Sports Illustrated was the triple threat at Mania, the women's triple threat, Io, Rhea, and Bianca, which was an incredible match. WrestleMania this year was a 2-match card between the 2 nights, and they were back-to-back, the main event of night 1 and the kickoff for night 2. Those 2 triple threat matches were the only thing that was good about WrestleMania this year. I'm sorry. The only good thing. And they happened back-to-back. So everything before that, everything after that, you did not have to watch. And I'll stand on that. But the match of the year for AEW, not just in-ring quality-wise, but just what it means to be a match, the stakes, the aura, the importance, the way it looks like this is a line in the sand that's going to change things moving forward. That was that main event at All In. And Hangman was the root of that. He just main evented Double or Nothing, winning the Owen Hart a year after he had came up short in his vengeful quest to get the world title. It wasn't about the world title. It was about beating Swerve and about taking something away from Swerve. Well, this year, it's not about necessarily just taking it from Jon Moxley, but it's about him needing it and wanting it for himself to make himself better. So once that story changed and it had all the stakes going into it, it's really hard not to say that's the match of the year. And it played on the same beats as the WrestleMania 40 main event, which we're going to talk about, like I said, and comparing Cody and Hangman. But the blueprint was right there. The layout was right there. Only thing they didn't do was the grandiose entrances to when everybody else is coming out and everything like that, which I love. AEW said, we're going to do this, but we're going to do a little bit different that makes sense, that makes it a little bit more natural to the product. And that's what the AEW needs to do. Take what works, but do it your way. No one's going to fault you for taking what works. They are going to fault you if you take what works and just rinse, wash, and repeat. Sorry. That no one wants to see that. But I absolutely love the fact that you had Hangman and his ragtag group of friends that aren't friends going up against this beast called the Death Riders, whether you like them or not. It was the same as Cody going up against the Bloodline. It was perfect, perfect, perfect. And just like WrestleMania 40 main event was perfect, the All-In main event was perfection. And nothing that WWE did this year lived up to that. Quality-wise, absolutely. The women's triple threat was amazing. But when it comes to everything and match quality, nothing beats that main event of All-In. Sorry. The stakes were, they were far from manufactured. Like Hangman rescuing a title belt that we had taken for granted, looking at the most beautiful belt in the business, and that had been in a briefcase for 8 months at that time. The cathartic feeling of him raising up the title that we had not seen for months was so amazing. Like that specific story beat started before Hangman, but having Hangman be the one to pry it out of that briefcase and to hold it up made all the sense in the world. Made more sense than Cody ending Roman's reign, personally. That's just me. We'll talk about that another day. But Hangman's redemption story bleeding into the Death Riders made a whole lot more sense than Cody Rhodes' I have to finish the story bleeding into the Bloodline, into the Tribal Chief saga. Non-comparison, but we're getting away from that. It was the stakes that elevated that match and everything that came from that. So it was definitely my vote for match of the year. It was inevitable and it was unforgettable. And it was also the match that culminated the feud of the year, which was the Death Riders' death grip on AEW. And the feuding of that with the feuding, what's the word I'm looking for? Fusing. That's the word I'm looking for. Feuding. The fusion of the Death Rider story with Hangman's redemption arc is incredible. They needed each other. because Hangman really needed a big bad to solidify himself as the big good. And unfortunately, MJF just hadn't established himself like that since his return in 2024, which we can also talk about was part of why the momentum of AEW wasn't good, because their champion from all of 2023 comes back in 2024 and does essentially nothing. But we'll talk about that another time. But this feud, it wasn't about promo battles. It was all about escalation. It was about patience. And it was about payoff. The program was just, oh my God. It worked because it was layered. Hangman wasn't just fighting Moxley. He was fighting AEW's past and his own past. The violence, the grind, the blood, the sweat, the tears, everything that comes with being a part of an industry like this, Hangman was putting on the line against the Death Riders. It's the idea that you have to lose yourself to lead the company. And he was saying, I'm willing to lose myself right now to lead the company. Moxley and the Death Riders, they represented the philosophy of this. And Hangman said, you know what? I'm going to take this and I'm going to grow it even better. Every encounter that they had pushed the story forward, them harping on their history of how Mox and Hangman have history together on an individual basis, how the Blackpool Combat Club and the Elite have history, and how now it was Hangman and his ragtag bunch versus the Death Riders. There is literal progression and escalation that you can pull to. Even though that may not be intended, that's the great thing about professional wrestling, is even things that are unintended, you can always pull back on. You can always draw back to your history if you tell it correctly. You know what I'm saying? But when Hangman finally won the belt, everything felt earned. It didn't feel booked. It didn't feel like, okay, this is the person that we decided and it's happening, whoop-de-doo. It felt like, you know what? Yes, Hangman has to be the guy. This has to be what we do. And this is what they did. And now, with Wrestler of the Year, with Match of the Year, and with the Feud of the Year under their belt, it's not far-fetched to say AEW won in a landslide as promotion of the year. For 2025, absolutely. They may not have made the most money, but everything outside of the money-making metrics, say that 3 times fast, AEW was definitely on top of it. They had the clear-cut top guy as far as main character in Hangman, a career-defining feud, not only for Hangman, but also for Mox and the Death Riders, because the fall of the Death Riders since then, although the pacing has not been incredibly well, you could say that Mox himself is on a higher place now than he was at the beginning of the year, and he doesn't even have the title. And then that the moment of Hangman defeating Mox, lifting up the title for the first time in 8 months, it was a moment that felt earned. So you have the top guy, you have the top feud, you have the top match, you have the top moment. It's only appropriate that all of those things come down to being the top, aiding the top promotion. WWE didn't get those things. I can't tell you right now who I think is the defining character of WWE in 2025. It should have been John Cena, and they dropped the ball with that tremendously. So outside of Cena, there has been no main character in WWE. Fight me. There's been no career-defining feud for anybody. Fight me. There has been no match of this year that has said, this is a line drawn in the sand that's going to change the company forever. It was supposed to be the triple threat when Seth and Paul Heyman aligned, and I was all for that. And then they dropped the ball on that almost immediately after adding in Braun Breaker and not doing anything really substantial with him and Bronson throughout the summer and in the fall. And we're not even going to talk about that fake injury to real injury for Seth Rollins. All of that just to slap Goldberg in the face. I respect the pettiness. I don't like it, but I respect it from Triple H. Triple K. So with the clear-cut guy, the defining feud, defining match, and that championship moment, or that moment that lives forever, Those four things led to the fifth. Is that correlation or causation? You can decide. I think the four causes the one. If the one is usually going to have majority, if not all of those things happening in their favor. And if you don't believe me, the next episode that we're going to talk about is going to be comparing directly Cody's chase to the title versus Hangman's chase for the title. And we're going to show how making them the clear-cut center of the company and riding that wave really makes a difference in gaining momentum. And then we'll talk about how the momentum for Cody fell off a cliff and how the momentum for Hangman is rising the cachet of other people in the company. So, like I said, with all of these things, AEW being the promotion of the year makes perfect sense. And WWE being the promotion of the year in 2024 made perfect sense. So you had Cody, you had Roman in the Bloodline, you had that championship win. And this year you had Hangman, Moxley, the Death Riders, and you had their All-In championship win. So that's what's incredible. In AEW in 2025, they followed the same blueprint, but they did not copy it. And I love that. Follow the blueprint, follow the outline, but do not copy and paste. Do it better if you can, but if you can't, at least do it in your own way. That's why AEW was promotion of the year this year. Not because of metrics, not because of opinions, not because of noise, but because they kept their stories aligned to the best of their abilities. So, to close things out for today and to prepare for part 3 of our trilogy, when Wrestler of the Year, Match of the Year, Feud of the Year, Promotion of the Year are all a part of the same story, that is not a coincidence. That is peak professional wrestling. And AEW this year gave us peak professional wrestling. They gave us bangers when it came to this Hangman story and his year, and they got the momentum. And in the next episode, we're going to zoom out even more, and we're going to talk about how WWE successfully we're going to talk about how well the WWE successfully capitalized on the post-Cody momentum and how AEW is now trying to do the same, if not better, than they did in their post-Hangman era. So stay with us. We're going to be back for one more episode before we launch the original podcast of this channel. Please stay tuned. Please like, please share, please subscribe. We appreciate you for tuning in. I am Wrestling's New Kid. I am Christopher Kidd, and we appreciate you for being here. Join us next time.